Brother Ron, and welcome to We All Be News Radio and TV, the news-free Dixie for the 21st century. Good evening, boys and girls, scholars and laymen. Welcome to another wonderful, edutaining, and infotaining edition of The Artivist Thinks Thought Provocateurs. We're at the movies. We're at the movies. This is my movie review of the film Bolden, which came out this past May. Didn't stay in the theaters real long. Bolden is, of course, based on the true story of the first jazz king. That's Charles Buddy Bolden, the man who they said was the first jazz star, the first trumpet king of New Orleans jazz, the man who invented America's original art form. Allegedly. This is about him and this is his story. Much is not really known about Buddy Bolden. He was born September 6, 1877, down in New Orleans. He's a Virgo. Some of the greatest musicians and visionaries in the music field were Virgos. Think about, well, you got Beyonce, right? And also, August 29th is a special day in music history. Charlie Parker, Dinah Washington, Michael Jackson, and some others were born August 29th. So he's a Virgo. So that adds to the legend of him being a music great. But he's the man who came up with the jazz sound, supposedly. Very popular among New Orleans musicians during the turn of the last century, late 19th century, early 20th century. Allegedly blew his brains out with the trumpet or cornet. That's the cousin of the trumpet. Was checked into an insane asylum around the age of 30, 31. Spent the rest of his life in an insane asylum. Died at the age of 54 back in 1931 in Jackson State Insane Asylum down in Louisiana. So this is his life story. There are no known recordings of Buddy Bolden that exist. So I mean, his sound really resides in the memories of the ancestors who heard him. I believe everybody who heard Buddy Bolden in the flesh have since become ancestors. But based on what the old timers have left, that some people say he was loud, you could hear him miles away. Other folks like Louis Armstrong claimed that he sounded a lot like Miles Dewey Davis, one of my favorite trumpet players. So I don't really know what to think of it. But I wanted to see the movie. It only stayed in one weekend, really, in Memphis. Only one theater in Memphis had the movie in the Memphis area. It was in Bartlett and only stayed in the theaters for 1 week. It didn't make it to a second weekend in Memphis. It was very limited distribution. Now, the movie was produced and directed by Danny Pritzker, who is a heir of the Hyatt hotel chain dynasty. He's worth himself $2 billion. So this was a passion project for him. He's also a musician, from my understanding. So this was very much a passion project for him to do this story about Buddy Bolden. The soundtrack was done by Wynton Marsalis. Wynton is an award-winning trumpet virtuoso, director of jazz at the Lincoln Center. So he's a music icon. He won a Pulitzer for his original work, Blood on the Fields, a little bit over 20 years ago. And basically it was the blueprint. He got the blueprint for his Pulitzer-winning work from Duke Ellington's Black, Brown, and Beige. My understanding, he went up to Smithsonian and checked out some of Duke's compositions before he did his magnum opus, Blood on the Fields. And which is ironic because Duke could not even win a Pulitzer when he was alive. The Pulitzer committee did not think that Duke Ellington was worthy of a Pulitzer. Duke Ellington is arguably the greatest American composer of all time. And this is back, I believe, in 1966, right? So he was like 67 years old. I mean, he did all this phenomenal work, kept a band running for almost 50 plus years. did a lot of landmark recordings, including Black, Brown, and Beige, which is a music project that talked about the history of black people in America. Because Duke was very much a historian. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. It was more than just dancing music. It was about recording black people's story in America. But he said, Duke, in his reply, that God did not want him to be famous too young. And really, like, Kendrick Lamar won a Pulitzer, however you pronounce it, recently. What was that, 2018? And he was the first rapper to win one, but Duke didn't win one. So we gotta really tell our ancestor story, and we gotta really vouch for our greats as black people. But that's another story. Not really, but Danny Pritzker, worth $2 billion, did this movie about this black music genius who nobody knows what he sounded like, but he is given the credit for being the first jazz musician. Now, Danny Pritzker, I would love to see a documentary about the making of the Bolden movie, because what people don't know, Danny Pritzker did two full movies. He did a earlier Bolden movie, I believe around 2007. You actually found evidence of this online. He actually had Baba Dick Gregory play the older version of Buddy Bolden in the insane asylum. They filmed this movie, I believe, in North Carolina, and then I think he went back in 2014 and did the second version, which came out in the theaters this year, 2019. But I would love to see that version of the Bolden film. In my opinion, Dick Gregory was a little bit too old to play the older Buddy, because Buddy Bolden died at 54. Dick was past 54 at that point when they did the filming. But it would be intriguing to see him play the part of an older Buddy Bolden, because it's Dick Gregory. And he also played a jazz musician when he was a younger man back in the 60s in a movie. He played Eagle Stokes, which was based on Charlie Bird Parker. And he did a good job in that movie, in my opinion. He was actually like a method actor. But anyway, man, I'm talking a lot, am I? The Bolden movie, I enjoyed it. I know some people criticize how it portrayed Buddy Bolden and black culture. People wasn't hip to that. I have friends or people, colleagues, who didn't care for the movie, but it's Hollywood, right? It's Hollywood. It's Hollywood. When they say based on a true story, they don't really. It's really deceptive when they say based on a true story. It could be it's a true story because so and so was wearing Air Jordans when this happened in their lives. So the only thing that could be true about the movie would be that the character was wearing Jordans, and they could make up everything else. You know what I'm saying? That's how tricky it is. It's like lawyers don't really lie; they just leave out certain things, right? I talked to several lawyers. I tell them it's a perception that lawyers lie for a living. He said, "No, we don't lie," or they say, "We don't lie. We just leave out certain details, which may not be pertinent in our opinion to the story that we tell." So, like those Hollywood movies. So when you look at a movie like Malcolm X, I mean, when Malcolm X came out some years ago, and people thought the character Minister Baines was an actual real character that Malcolm met while he was in prison. The people that got him turned on to the Nation of Islam was not no Minister Baines. It was actually his family. It was Malcolm's brothers and sisters that got him into the Nation of Islam. But it's a thing in Hollywood called composite characters, right? Well, they can't. Malcolm lived to be 39 years old, right? No matter how long the movie like 3 hours and almost 30 minutes, right? Malcolm X movie. It's hard to tell every detail of a person's life who lived a interesting life in 39 years. You can't put 39 years to 3.5 hours of movie making, right? So you do things for dramatic purposes, to tell a story. Everything's about telling a story. Now with Buddy Bolden, there's not too much known about him in his personal life. It's like he lived to be 54 years old, but he got locked up in the insane asylum and he was forgotten about basically by the general public. Time marches on. Time waits for no one. Father time always win. It just marches on. So with that said, there are a lot of things that people said about Bolden over the years. There were maybe rumors or a myth, but they become fact over time that you do a lot of fact checking and research. But with this movie, I feel like it not only tells the story of the first jazz musician, the first acknowledged so-called jazz musician in history. But it also tells a story. There's a very American one. Buddy Bolden to me was the first rock and roll star. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. There is plenty of sex, drugs, or there are plenty of sex, drugs, and rock and roll in this film. A lot of gratuitous nudity. I'm not complaining about that. Some beautiful black women in the movie showing their goodies, Buddy getting his freak on, big orgies and all this other stuff. But I was surprised to think about the reputation of Wynton Marsalis, who did a great job with the soundtrack. Wynton is a great musician. I don't agree with a lot of his politics as it relates to music and culture, but you can't deny he's a great musician. The fact that he's such a well known critic and I guess moralist about hip hop culture and rap music, that he'll be involved in a project where there's like a overwhelming display of nudity of black women body parts, and in a lot of ways exploitation of black women. But nevertheless, I enjoyed the movie for what it was. But yeah, it definitely is American stories. He's the first casualty of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Buddy Bolden. He living life to excess. With being a musician comes certain perks. You get women admirers, even male admirers, right? You get access to drugs, you get treated a certain way. He was the king, called him King Bolden. I think Gary Carr did a great job of portraying Buddy Bolden. He had a canvas, he basically had a blank canvas to work with so he could paint Buddy Bolden in a way that, like with Malcolm X, you had like, the autobiography of Malcolm X, you got film footage of Malcolm X, we knew how he sounded and all this other stuff. Whereas Buddy Bolden is only two known photos that I can think of Buddy Bolden. One with his band, and then there's a picture of him, an illustrative picture of him. Those are only two known images I know of the actual Buddy Bolden. And we don't know how he sounded. So Gary Carr had a lot of room to work with, and I think he did a great job of making this man a human being with frailties and complexities, all that involved. I also like the guy who played his manager. This is the brother from Empire. Not Empire, but Boardwalk Empire. That's Eric LaRay Harvey. He's a great character actor. I think he's underrated, underutilized. Did a great job as being Buddy Bolden's manager. He reminded me of a Don King type. He was a Don King prototype. I don't know in real life that he had a manager that was black, but in the movie, like I said, there's not a lot of well-known facts about Buddy Bolden's life. He's a ghost, really, and that's why I think it was important that this film was done, regardless of the critiques of the film. That somebody thought enough of Buddy Bolden to do a film, and the production quality was pretty good. It reminded me of those movies that came out recently about Jackie Robinson, that Chadwick Boseman played. It had a type of glossy feel to it, like they put money behind the narrative and the film production quality. Also, the Jesse Owens movie that came out had that type of feel to it, And I think what people's biggest problem is, like I know I said a lot of nudity, but people gotta understand that jazz, America's original music, was born in the whorehouse. Storyville was the red light district where the prostitutes used to hang out and do their business, right? So Storyville was actually closed by the U.S. Navy during World War One because allegedly they feel like too many of the servicemen were getting syphilis and stuff going to Storyville. But Storyville is where Louis Armstrong, Autumn Cass, Jelly Roll Morton hanged out at. Louis Armstrong, he, like a lot of our great icons, American icons, cultural icon artists, a lot of them have connections to the whorehouse, to red light districts, like Louis Armstrong. I believe his mom, she was church going, but she used to go. My understanding, she was a prostitute from time to time. Louis Armstrong's first wife, Daisy Parker, was a prostitute. Louis used to sell coal to the prostitutes in Storyville for the Russian Jewish family, the Konofskis. He talks about this in his autobiography and other sources. Louis, I would tell people, read his letters. Satchmo was a prolific letter writer. He wrote his letters how he played his trumpet. It was very honest, very powerful picture. He painted picture with his words, and he used vernacular of the people. He was a people person. He didn't come from no academy or from the upper class blue blood family or boule. He came from the hood. He came from the streets. He came from a place called the Battlefield, Jane Alley, way back of town. So Lewis was like that type of cat, right? So read his letters. You'll be surprised at how Lewis thought, but he was very street smart and also very deep and reflective, and it comes across. So, I mean, think James Brown. He grew up in the whorehouse. His mama was a prostitute, right? His biopic that came out recently with Chadwick Boseman played James Brown. I thought I enjoyed it. He talks about his roots in that. Richard Pryor, grandma was actually a madam of a whorehouse up in Illinois, where he's from. Peoria, Illinois. You know, JoJo Dancer, Your Life is Calling was a semi-autobiographical about Richard Pryor, starring Richard Pryor. His grandma is portrayed as a madam who went to church on Sunday. And I believe his mom did some tricking too. But he talks about this in his autobiography as well. So you cannot dismiss that jazz benefited from that association with the whorehouse. And also to the point, think about prohibition. Well, jazz flourished during prohibitions in mob ran nightclubs and speakeasies. Because jazz was like the rap or hip hop of its day. It was a popular music, but also it was a music looked down upon by so-called the greater society. You know, the people that were the elites looked down upon jazz. It was not accessible or acceptable music. It was not accepted by the so-called elites of society, but it was a grassroots folk music that came out of the field, the plantation, out the brothels, out the speakeasies, and all that stuff. So I think the movie gets it right, and like it's a very spiritual music. It came out the church too. You know, think like some of the greatest black musicians we ever produced got roots in the church. Think about even Louis Armstrong used to sing in the church when he was growing up in New Orleans. Mahalia Jackson from New Orleans sang in the church, right? Aretha Franklin sang in the church. Sam Cooke. Think about all these musicians. They even Snoop Dogg used to sing in his church choir. So you got the church, you got the brothel, you got these places where America's original art form, jazz, have grown roots into. So I think it gets it right in that aspect. And also it talks about the exploitation of black people's creative genius in a white inferiority society. I'm not gonna call it white supremacy. It's not white supremacy because it's not supreme by nature. It's a it's a system that exploits black talent and black genius for white wealth. Is what Dr. Clyde Anderson said: black labor, white wealth. So it talks about the early days of the music industry, so to speak, was also born with Buddy Bolden. In the movie, it portrays how the white so-called inferiority system exploited and controlled Buddy Bolden like through drugs. Think about this. This has been well documented how this system controlled black folks through drugs. Think about Iran Contra, the crack dropped into black neighborhoods throughout the country during the 80s to support United States nefarious activities in Central and South America, right? Gary Webb, Dark Alliance, Killed the Messenger, that movie that came out about Gary Webb, the guy who worked at a newspaper out in Cali who exposed the government's involvement in putting drugs and guns in the black community throughout the country. This has been going on for decades, right? Black folks are the people that everybody blames stuff on in America. Now, whether we did it or not, we're the ones always blamed for everything. For example, black folks could sit out 2020 and not vote for anybody and we'll still get blamed. Oh, you the reason why they lost. Just like in 2016, right? Trump ran for office. Black women voted 90-something% for Hillary Clinton, but it was the white women that voted overwhelmingly for Trump. But yet it's black people fault that Trump won. You see how it works? No matter what we do, we blame. It's a lynching mindset in America. But yeah, I enjoyed Buddy Bolden for what it was. There's some things that I could not believe really happened, might have happened, because Black history is weird. Like, it's a scene where Eric Harvey's character, the manager for Buddy Bolden, push him out a hot air balloon, and he's falling down. He got the parachute on, and he let the parachute out. He started playing his cornet. If that was me, I would have not been held on to no cornet or trumpet. It would have fell out my hands. Probably would have crapped it myself. Whatever. Maybe the parachute don't work, but it's dramatic, right? I like the scene where he push him out the hot air balloon with the cornet and the parachute on, and he's parachuted into a park where there's I guess a black or Creole band playing society music, polite society music, right? Proper music, musicians could read the music sheets and they playing classical, whatever, fair of the day. And Buddy come in with this improvised, hot, spiritual, feeling, funky music that you're not reading, you create it on the spot. We don't read no music. We can't read music. We feel the music. Like Sam Cooke you saying, don't fight it, just feel it. So you're feeling the music and catch the mind and imagination of George Baquet. I think that's how you say it because they French down there, Creole and all that. He's a clarinetist that joins Buddy Bolden's music revolution. Now, I also thought that Reno Wilson did a great job in capturing the spirit of Louis Armstrong. I think we're long overdue for a Louis Armstrong movie, a biopic. I know Ben Vereen did something back in the 70s on Louis Armstrong. We need an update. And I think Reno Wilson is up for the job. He did a great performance of Louis Armstrong because it kept on going back and forth between Louis Armstrong and Buddy Bolden. It was a series of flashbacks, really, because Buddy Bolden, the elder Buddy Bolden, is in a mental institution having flashbacks over his life while he's listening to Louis Armstrong play not that far away on the radio. So I guess it's trying to show how Louis Armstrong was inspired by Buddy Bolden to become a musician like so many others during that period. And I mentioned the James Brown biopic because they do have a battle royale scene. And when people think about battle royales, they're thinking about, WWE style, you got the wrestlers in the ring battling out. But really, battle royales is interesting because this also was a theme in The Invisible Man, the book by Ralph Ellison. And I remember them being showcased also in the James Brown biopic starring Chadwick Boseman. And now you have this in the Bolden thing. We got all these black people fighting against each other, blindfolded. They knocking each other out. And last man standing wins. But you got all these white people around the ring throwing money at the feet of the black people while they fight each other in the dark. You know what I'm saying? And that's how this system keeps power over black people. It keeps us divided and conquered. See, that's how the white power system works. It's about divide and conquer, but black power is about unity and solidarity. Jazz is about celebrating individual within a community. So you need a team, you need a band, but at the same time, the band is not about being conform. It's not about conformity. It's not about you can't be yourself. What it is, the band is a safe space where you can express yourself in your community. That's what jazz is. It's community. Think about how jazz is used in New Orleans back in that period. You think about the second line. Music brings people together. Music is not about politics. It's not about this and that. Music has a way of bringing folks with differences together for one common cause, as is to celebrate, to dance, to enjoy. So it's a universal language. And so what they said, those things are powerful because this is how Jack Johnson, the Galveston Giant, came up in Texas. Jack Johnson, the first black heavyweight champion, got his start in doing battle royals, fighting out with black people, blindfolded, white men throwing money at their feet. And a lot of times he'll be the last Negro standing and he collect the money at the end. So this is the way it works. So also I will compare and contrast Buddy Bolden with another great jazz film, in my opinion, underrated. One of Spike Lee's most underrated films is Mo Better Blues, which stars Denzel Washington in the lead as Bleak, the trumpeter for a jazz band in New York City, set in 1990s, late 80s, 1990s New York City, and also his bandmate Shadow, played by Wesley Snipes, and then you had Giant, played by Spike Lee, who was the manager of the band and Bleak's best friend. I would compare and contrast these two movies together because Bleak had a thing. He really was obsessed with his music. His music came first in his life, but also he had a thing for these women. Uh, Spike Lee's sister played a love interest, and also his other sister, who was the jazz singer in the band, played a love interest. And like with Buddy Bolden, they say he went crazy. Why did he go crazy? In the movie, it's like he was living life to the fullest, to excess. Like he had a lot of women, admirers, and girlfriends. So like I said, a lot of gratuitous sex scenes. I'm not complaining about it. A lot of frontal nudes. You saw a black woman's beautiful body. But also it showed him like he had drug issue and alcohol. So maybe he had a nervous breakdown, exhaustion, mental exhaustion, physical exhaustion. Maybe he had syphilis or something like that because syphilis was the AIDS back then. A lot of people, died from syphilis because, like, penicillin was not discovered to treat syphilis till like decades later. This is the early 1900s. So maybe he had some issues, complications from syphilis. Who knows? But, unfortunately, there's no known recordings of Buddy Bolden. But I like how this movie feeds your imagination. And, you know, I'm just glad somebody did a movie about Buddy Bolden. For the most part, like when Nate Parker did this movie about Nat Turner. To me, I enjoyed it for what it was. There's some things I would have done differently how he portrayed white women. The white women were not portrayed as being involved in the slavery situation, even though white women were involved. A lot of white women in slavery treated the slaves worse than the white men. They were using some of these slaves as sex slaves. I mean, look at a movie called Goodbye, Uncle Tom. It's very disturbing to watch. I only looked at it one time. And I looked at the director's cut. It was done by these Italians back in the 70s. And basically, what they did talk about the history of slavery in America and used primary sources like, diaries, newspaper articles, things of that nature to tell the story about slavery, the slavery Holocaust in America. It's very graphic. It doesn't pull any punches. So that's a movie I would say you want to understand what slavery was all about. Look at that movie because it shows the involvement not only white women, but also institutions like the church, medical institutions that were involved in exploiting black people pain and bodies and spirit. All this stuff is shown in Goodbye Uncle Tom. But with Buddy Bolden movie, I would encourage people to look at it and then talk about it, discuss it. But also, I will also encourage people to look at Mo Better Blues and compare and contrast the two movies. Because Mo Better Blues was told by a black person, Spike Lee, right? Had an ensemble cast, and Buddy Bolden is told from a wealthy white man's perspective who was passionate about this story. But I definitely would encourage people to see the movie and to form their own opinions about the movie. I'm gonna look at the movie a second time, but I just want to share my understanding of the movie. Also, I like the movie alluded to police brutality as well. There's a scene, a parade scene, I guess it was Labor Day or Memorial Day. Black folks invented Memorial Day, and the parade ended up, I don't know if it fell apart. Buddy Bolden was in the parade playing. Oh, it was a club scene. He was at a club, and then it was like a police thing, a police disturbance. People don't understand that most so-called riots and stuff in American history were caused by law enforcement. Law enforcement caused a lot of disturbances that led to race riots and massacres. And so it was a scene. It kind of like it was paying homage to the Robert Charles riots, which happened July 23rd through the 27th, 1900. It was a 4-day rally. 4-day riot There was calls from Robert Charles, a black man who was like a Pan Africanist, was being harassed and brutalized by police by waiting for his girlfriend outside her living quarters or home. He shot back in self defense. He killed several police officers, and it caused a major riot in New Orleans for 4 days. You had white folks by the thousands from around New Orleans, even Mississippi, I believe Texas and stuff like that, come out to New Orleans to go shoot and kill black people. They used the excuse of Robert Charles. They said we try to look for Robert Charles, and they were just shooting and killing black folks at random. They decimated black New Orleans for 4 days. Robert Charles was snitched out by a neighborhood snitch, kind of like a shitty cuz snitched him out. And the white folks came to the house, surrounded the house, killed him, and then basically they lynched him. They basically ripped his body to shreds, apart. It's crazy. And the snitch ended up getting killed not too long thereafter. And Ida B. Wells wrote about it in one of her pamphlets. I think it was the Red Record. She talked about the riot in New Orleans, the race massacre. And also, Professor William Ivy Hare wrote a book called Carnival of Fury, which is a great read, which talks about the Robert Charles riots, as they call them, in even greater detail. So there's a scene in the movie that alludes to that incident of the Robert Charles riots. So the black folks considered Robert Charles a folk hero. He died, but his legend grew large in the black community because he stood up for himself, he defended himself, and he was willing to put his life on the line for what he believed in. It's like in the words of Dr. King, Mr. Nonviolence, according to y'all, if a man ain't willing to die for something, he ain't fit to live. I'm paraphrasing Dr. King. If a man ain't willing to die for anything, he ain't fit to live. So they created a song, a folk song called the Ballad of Robert Charles. This is what jazz musicians and ragtimers were playing in and around New Orleans after the Robert Charles riots. They created this folk song called the Ballad of Robert Charles. According to General Morton, it was forgotten about, quote unquote, because it angered white customers at these places, bar rooms and stuff like that. White folks didn't want to hear this song, so the black musicians allegedly forgot about the song. And hopefully there's some type of sheet music around with the lyrics of the Ballad of Robert Charles. I would love to hear that, or somebody recorded it, but yeah, it's hearsay at this point. But Buddy Bolden did have a theme song, and it's called I Thought I Heard Buddy Bolden Say. I thought I heard Buddy Bolden say. That was his theme song. He used to play at the Funky Butt Hall down in New Orleans and places like that. And it outlived him and is immortalized for all time thanks to General Morton. He recorded a version of the Buddy Bolden Blues, or I thought I heard Buddy Bolden say. Okay, so take a look. It's all online. I just want y'all to get in the habit of, as we move forward in this age of censorship and accountability, do your own research. Like, I'm just basically giving y'all some things to ponder, some crumbs, some food for thought. But you got to obey your thirst and quench your appetite or quench your thirst for yourself. So see how it works. I don't know. I enjoyed it, and I recommend people seeing it. And I don't see too many people talking about it online because it didn't last that long. I believe it's shown on one of these premium cable network channels. I think Epics or something like that is showing it right now. But yeah, if you enjoy the words you heard from Brother Herb, please spread the word. Please sign up, subscribe to We All Be TV. If you believe that knowledge is the currency of the universe and you'd like to support the We All Be Info movement, please feel free to donate to our Cash App, which is $R2C2H2. Once again, that's R to C to H2. You can also donate via PayPal or Google Pay. The email address is r2c2h2 at gmail.com. Once again, donate to PayPal, Google Pay, email r2c2h2 at gmail.com. You can buy Artivist Art, r2c2h2.com. That's r2c2h2.com. Also buy, you can wear Artivist gear. We could wear our story. Go to our Teespring, R2C2H2's place. You can also see the shelf below the video of some of the shirts. We updating it on a regular basis. Got so much art to share with the world. I want y'all to wear the art, to frame it and put it up in your homes, to buy it as gifts, because this is a movement. And also, Buddy Bolden, Robert Charles are both buried in unmarked graves in Holt Cemetery. That's Holt Cemetery in New Orleans. They are buried in unmarked graves. So I look forward to going to New Orleans and paying my respects to both of these men. There's actually a memorial to Buddy Bolden in Holt Cemetery. That's Holt, Holt Cemetery. But yeah, Buddy Bolden, America's first rock and roll star. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. He created the blueprint for what was to come. I don't think he could predict the future, but I don't know. Sometimes history is made by everyday people. And amazing thing, we're still talking about Buddy Bolden. 2019 is we're still talking about Buddy Bolden. Nobody knows what he really sounds like that's alive right now. The oldest living person in America is a black woman. She's 114 years old. She don't know how Buddy Bolden sounded because he came before her. So, with that said, we got to keep our ancestors alive. If we don't tell their stories, the ancestors gets no glory. Thank you all for listening once again. In the words of the great Duke Ellington, we love you, Matt Lee. Keep on producing and pushing.